Hey, what's up everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for episode number 102, in which we are going to talk about something potentially frightening in Los Angeles. Something that a lot of local doctors are trying to get national news on. And for some reason, the national news is not picking it up. So I'm going to do my best to get the word out on what seems to be a frightening secret. But before I do that, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to the last special podcast that I put out about my father. If you haven't listened yet, I invite you to listen. It is a 2-hour and 20-minute episode in which I really just share a lot of stories about the man that affected, me and influenced me more than anybody else in the world. And for those of you that listened, based on your comments, which were incredible, guys. I mean, you definitely had me crying over here. As you guys heard, he was a special man. And I could still be talking about him today. I could be talking about him for the rest of my life, and I will. I want to do everything I can to preserve this man's legacy, because Rod Calek was, a true warrior with a puppy dog's heart. He was a loving and amazing gentleman that was just tough as nails. So thank you guys for that. And again, if you haven't listened, it's, just in the same list with all the other episodes. Also, with Dad's passing, I'll be honest, and I know he would have no problem with me saying this, because it's what he would want. I don't know that I ever will stop mourning his loss, but what I can say is with, Dad no longer suffering, there has been a degree of, sadness or depression that I have certainly felt, lifted off of my shoulders. Of course you never want a loved one to pass, but the worst thing about all of it is, if you can't find a cure, and if there's not going to be, kind of a victory, the last thing you want is for someone to suffer. And that's what was going on. And that just made life so hard, especially when your job is, to make movies about dead people and ghosts and things like that. I mean, when your dad is fighting for his life, you don't want to deal with that and then jump right back into something about, dead people and ghosts. So, it made it difficult to talk about paranormal cases and stuff like that with the podcast. It made editing for 74 minutes very difficult, on top of everything else. And I guess the point I'm getting at here is I feel like there's a degree of kind of darkness that I'm coming out of. And I'm usually an extremely productive person. And not that I necessarily haven't been, but depression has a way of taking away your ability to just crank out episodes and, to edit 18 minutes in a day. But basically my point is, things are going to be ramping up here again. It's funny now that I look back at it, because you want to talk about Murphy's Law? I sent an email out to everybody saying that March 15th was going to be the date that, I was going to fire back up the special podcast series, and we would release Phantom Rider, and a month later, 74 Minutes would come out. Well, if you want to, know the kind of luck I've been facing, March 15th, we did make that release date for Phantom Rider. That was the same day that the lockdown came out of nowhere and shut this city down and sent it into a frenzy, in which Laura's been home the whole time. And right after the lockdown, I got COVID-19, which sidelined me for a good 2 weeks. And I started to feel better around the 14th of April, and my dad passed away on the 21st. So it's been, a steady 2 months of difficulties, but thankfully I feel like there's a clear path now.
So everybody hang tight. The DVDs for Phantom Rider, the manufacturer has, he's already been paid, but they were shut down. They were shut down on the 15th, and they've been shut down, and I'm told that they could reopen on June 1st. And so it shouldn't take long after that to get those DVDs out to everybody. Usually it's 5 to 7 days time that it takes to actually press those, and then they'll be fired out to everybody who ordered one, which I thank you guys. I will have more news in regard to 74 Minutes as well. That's the next release, and it shouldn't, roughly, I could tell you right now, it'll be roughly towards the end of June is when that will be coming out. But hang tight, because I'll email everybody who has pre-ordered it, and I'll give you an exact release date here in a couple weeks. I'll know where things stand once some local laws kind of play themselves out, if I can make sure that this DVD distributor is going to be able to stay open, and once I could see how many minutes a day I'm editing now, because we are at the very, very end of it. And you guys are going to be blown away. Like I said, this is a movie that's 25 years in the making. 25 years in the making. So if you like paranormal evidence, get ready, because you're going to see a whole bunch of it. And it's jaw-dropping stuff. You guys are going to be floored. And the last announcement that I have before we get into the podcast is that over the last, month and a half, we have been doing major discounts off my catalog. Like, when I say major, I mean we've been discounting things like 80%. We've also given away several free screenings. And I honestly can say I did that not only to keep a steady, revenue stream coming in throughout the lockdown for us, because obviously when you lower the prices of things, you're going to have, an influx of greater sales, but, you lower the price as well. So to me, it wasn't just about maintaining. If you're like me, nothing is worse than four walls and time. I hate being alone for long periods of time. My mind always goes in the worst place, and I know a lot of people are like that. And throughout this lockdown, I truly wanted to, make it as easy as possible for everybody to have stuff to watch. And I've been making films now for well over 20 years. And specifically in the last decade, there's been 20 films that I've made. So those are on Vimeo On Demand. And I know that some of you have been with me since day one. And that's awesome. And I know that some of you have just now discovered Phantom Rider. Some of you have just now discovered my music and found out through that I make films, which always blows my mind. It's so interesting how the web works that way. And that really happened. Last week, somebody who was a longtime listener of the In a Crowded Room music that just found it on SoundCloud. And then they said, dude, someone told me that you were a filmmaker. I had no idea. And so, you never know how people, find out who you are. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to entertain themselves. So we did. We lowered our prices lower than we have ever lowered them. Typically, to purchase a new release is anywhere between $20 or $25. We did a triple feature with Sir No Face, Two-Face the Great, and Phantom Rider, which is obviously a new release. We did all three of those for $14.99. Which 2 nights ago I said this is the last night that we're going to be doing it. That is true as far as advertising that through my social media pages. But as always, for just you who are hearing this, a little added benefit for listening, tonight until tomorrow at noon, if you have not seen all three films and you want to watch the trilogy, the link is going to be at the bottom of the description box below, along with all of our other discounted film bundles. They're going to be available to you until noon tomorrow, in which everything will return to its original prices. And you might say, well, why, Chad? Why are you returning everything to your original prices? Because Papa's got to keep these lights on. That's why. Papa's got to keep the lights on, Like anybody else, man, I'm in the same game you guys are, dealing with the same stuff. And, I'm really proud that we were able to offer discounts that deep. And if we ever get in a situation, again, where we feel that's the right thing to do, we absolutely will. So if you want to get in on some of these discounted bundles, you're going to have until tomorrow at noon to do it, in which everything will return to its normal prices, as we also try to get back in the flow of doing normal business. Although I realize we're probably far from that happening. Which, let's get into this episode, because we're going to talk a lot about the coronavirus and specifically what is going on here in Los Angeles. Which, to be honest, guys, I don't understand a lot of what is going on right now, because I'm going to share some stories with you in a minute that are absolutely true. And I'm witnessing what appears to be martial law. And if it's not, then I don't know what is. But let's start with yesterday. You know, I think everybody, if you're like me and you just want to get to work and you are tired to death of, sitting around at home and nobody else is working and no one's doing anything, and it becomes really difficult, to work and create, because you need, partners in the world, right? You can't dance by yourself. You got to have dance partners. And I'm in an industry that's completely shut down right now. Nobody's filming. No one's doing deals. It's just super frustrating. So I turned on the news to find out that Los Angeles is going to be shut down for 3 more months. And I am like, what in the fuck are they talking about? I cannot sit around here until August and lose my mind. And I think a lot of people felt that way as well. And then, today, somebody got their messages either wrong or I don't know, because, the governor and the mayor came on and said, well, listen, guys, I know what we said yesterday sounded like a lockdown until August, but all we meant to say is that the stay-at-home order is in play until August. And they're like, but don't worry, because we're going to have as much as 70% of businesses open. In which I'm like sitting here going, okay, I don't understand. So there's a stay-at-home order, but yay, because businesses are opening? If businesses are open and no one could go to them because they have a stay-at-home order, I don't understand what is going on. Just like the beaches. Like, guys, this is real. You can Google this, please. Fact check me here. They said they opened up the beaches, okay? Now, after they opened the beaches, the mayor came on to say, okay, the beaches are open with restrictions. You can use the beach, but you have to be wearing a mask. Okay, which doesn't make any sense. And this is why it doesn't make any sense. You're not allowed to sit at the beach. You're not allowed to congregate with friends at the beach. You are allowed to jog, to walk, to surf, or to play some kind of, frisbee maybe they're thinking when they say this. You can ride a bicycle on the bike paths. You can skateboard on the bike paths. But you cannot congregate or sit. This is crazy. And California supposedly, in comparison to larger cities like, New York and Miami, has a much lower infection rate. Supposedly. Which doesn't make any sense to me either. But I'm just so confused by this. So the businesses are opening, but there's a stay-at-home order until August. So no one's really going to go to the businesses. And a lot of the businesses that are opening up, they're opening up like to a percentage. Like restaurants are opening up, and they're saying they can only have 20% capacity. They can only fill to 20% capacity. In which local owners have come out right away to say, well, listen, we're going to lose our ass. Like, what are you talking about? If we open up our restaurants and only allow 20% of the people in, we now have to pay to keep the lights on, utilities, employees, cooks for 20%. And that's if they can get 20%, because remember, there's a stay-at-home order. So, this is going to be crushing to the economy here. And specifically in Santa Monica, because Santa Monica is nothing but Touristville. It is Touristville, USA. There are only 140,000 residents of Santa Monica, but on any given day, there's over 600,000 transient visitors. That means 600,000 people come through Santa Monica a day, whether that's through tourism, which it primarily is, or it's just people going to Malibu, or just people who live here who go to the beach. 600,000 people a day come through, and they congregate. That's what they do. And now they can't do it. And now restaurants, like I said, can only be opened up to a certain percentage of people. Plus, what's even weirder, and I'm going to put a photo. I want you guys to look at this. Okay, look on the screen right now. This is a photo that I took at my bank. There are businesses now that are not allowing people in the building if you have been COVID-19 positive, like myself, and recovered. Now, I said to Wells Fargo, which is, by the way, the worst bank in the world, but I actually like the people that work at my Wells Fargo. They're very cool people. This guy, Charles, who's the doorman there, I asked him, I said, Charles, I said, so how are they enforcing this? I mean, I said, I'll tell you right now, I'm COVID-19 positive. I got it. I got through it. I'm fine. And are they telling me that they don't want me to come in here? And he's like, yeah, that's the mandate. And like, you're not supposed to go in there. And I'm like, well, how would they know who's tested positive and who hasn't? And he goes, well, right now, they wouldn't know. It's your word. And he was like, but I could tell you this. He goes, we already had a meeting. And you know what's coming here? And I'm like, what? And he goes, I don't know when. He goes, but we are going to have machines that take your temperature. And if you're past a certain mark, you're not coming in. I'm like, you are fucking kidding me. And he's like, no. He's like, they are going to have machines here that take your temperature. And I'm like, that is wild, man. I'm like, so I can go in here right now. I just got to lie if somebody asks me. He's like, well, ain't no one going to ask you. He's like, but they're just putting the sign up right now to kind of break the ice early, to let people know that if you've been COVID-19 positive, even if you've recovered, yes, there are going to be places you cannot go. I'm like, that is just fucking wild, man. That is wild. And yes, it is a fact. Everywhere in Los Angeles right now, you have to wear the mask if you are outside, period. If you are just outside and cops see you without a mask, $1,000 fine, guys. $1,000 fine. $1,000 fine. This is crazy. A good third of the people in my building here have left. They cannot. The moratorium is it just got extended for another 30 days, and everybody thought that it was going to end, at the end of this weekend. But yeah, like a third of the people in my building, they're out. Most of them moved to Vegas. I had a couple guys that worked for the Lakers, and they just don't know when their jobs are coming back. And it's not like they can go find another job. They can't. So, I don't know ultimately what they did, but they couldn't afford to stay here. And, these guys worked for the Lakers. They worked in promotions. So they moved to my buddy Mario. If you're listening to Mario, love you, bro. You're the man. And good luck out there in Vegas, Mario. But yeah, Mario packed up his girl and they headed out to Vegas. And they're trying to find work out there in a good situation. But it's happening, man. And you know what? I can tell you this. If it's affecting my neighborhood, man, I just have so much empathy for, people that are less fortunate. Look, I'm not in any ways a rich man, but I'm fortunate enough to do well enough to live in a really nice part of town. And, thankfully, I have, between Laura and I, we have enough, we built enough in life right now where, we're going to keep a roof over our head. We're not at risk of being homeless or anything. But, listen, every day I wake up and pray to God that we're in that situation, because what I'm seeing in Los Angeles, guys, it's bad. It is bad out here. And this is a big reason why I wanted to talk about this episode, because what is going on with Tent City and Skid Row right now is scary, really scary. And there are doctors that are speaking up right now. And they're trying really hard to get a message out to the public. And I'm going to try to support them with that message. So what is that message? Well, first let's talk about what Tent City is and what Skid Row is, if you don't know, and what's been going on in Los Angeles. You know, back in 2001, when I moved to Los Angeles, the thing that stood out right away was the homeless population, specifically in Santa Monica and Venice. There was a lot of homeless people. And in Venice, it was really bad. And to be honest, Venice as a community, Venice Beach, was pretty run down. It was kind of known as, of all the beach cities, Redondo, Manhattan Beach, Marina del Rey, Santa Monica, Palisades, Malibu, those are the Bay, the West Bay, the beach cities. Out of all of them, Venice Beach was the only one that had real issues with like crime and infrastructure, buildings just dilapidated and just old and weather-ridden, and a lot of drug problems, a lot of legal issues with, I think at one point Venice was, per capita, they led the nation in auto thieveries, people steal cars, stolen cars. It was bad. There's old stories of different music artists shooting music videos in Venice and having to have massive hired security forces to pull it off. I mean, it was bad for a while, and it was bad right when I moved in to Santa Monica. When I first moved here, I literally moved into a tiny bachelor. I mean, I say small, it was small. I mean, Laura and I both, we had a Murphy bed, an old school Murphy bed that folded up into the wall. And because our living room, was our office, was our dining room, was our bedroom, we had literally a bathroom. And you could barely step into it. And then you come out of the bathroom and there was a little 6 foot by 4 foot area, 6 foot from the living room to the end of the kitchen, about 4 foot wide. And there was a hot plate. And that was the kitchen. And then the bed just folded down out of the wall. And you'd pull it down at night, go to bed, wake up, turn it back up. And at the time, we didn't even have a dresser. We folded our clothes and kept them in this little plastic box at the end of a couch, which I loved it. It was a great starter. That's all we needed. We needed just a way to hit the ground running. But what we knew at that time when I first moved in, and what I used to tell Laura all the time too, is don't go past Rose Avenue. Rose Avenue is where the Venice Boardwalk started. And the bottom line is it was dangerous. I mean, I'll tell you how dangerous it was, too. A year later, after we moved there, we moved out of there, and we skipped Venice, and we bounced over to this Driftwood Street, which is the first street on the other side of Venice. So we went from, being like 2 blocks away from the Venice Beach starting south of us, and then once we moved, we went from 1 block away from Venice Beach and the Venice Boardwalk starting to the north of us. Well, the second night that we moved into our little bachelor pad on Driftwood, my friend Sam and I, Sam Johnson from the band Mr. Plow, for my Iowa listeners, you'll know who that is. Good guy, Sam Johnson. We were out at the beach, just sitting in chairs, just, chopping it up, shooting the shit. And we decided, okay, it's getting late. The sun's starting to go down, so we start walking back home. Well, the police pull in, and all of a sudden I hear, "Get your hands in the air, please." I'm like, whoa, what are they talking to? We're literally like looking right at him going, what are they doing? All of a sudden we hear, "You, right there, put your hands up." And I look at him, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, is he talking to us? He's like, dude, I think he is. So, make a long story short, yeah, I put my hands up, I had to get on my knees, and I had to shuffle my way backwards to him, in which they handcuffed both of us, put us in the back seat of the car, because they said we both fit a description for a rape that had occurred on the beach at 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was freaking out. We both were, because we're going, look, when you're, a couple of boys fresh out the Midwest, and you're being told you fit the description by the LAPD of a rape that took place right there where you were on that beach. They're saying you fit the description. So yeah, I was like panicking. Well, as it turns out, I think they were just BSing us. I mean, I know there was a rape case there because we looked it up after the fact, but I think they were just trying to shake us to see if, you know, we were involved in any way. Because they ended up letting us go after they looked at our IDs and saw that, you know, everything we said checked out. But that's how bad crime was there initially in Venice Beach. Now, can you guys hear that? You might be able to hear. I'm still wheezing from that COVID, guys. A month ago, I still have some wheezing going on. It's pretty crazy. I'm fine. Don't get me wrong, but I still do have a little bit of wheezing. But anyways, my point being is, you know, by the time, you know, 2007, 2008 came, something happened where the homeless just started disappearing in Santa Monica, and especially Venice, just started disappearing. And I started hearing, you know, basically that there was some new policy and some new police chief that was allowing police to basically pick up homeless people and drive them down to downtown and drop them off. That basically they wanted them out of specifically Venice, because there's a couple developers that wanted to move into that market. So shortly after this starts happening, and they are literally rounding up the homeless, driving them to downtown and just dropping them off and telling them, don't come back here. You come back here, we're going to arrest you. And they started arresting them and actually putting them in jail, for local jail, just, you know, holding cells for like a day or two, and then they'll drop them back off downtown. They're basically establishing, we don't want your kind. We don't want you here. Don't come in because we're going to kick you out. And that's what was going on. And they were just dropping them, you know, downtown without any kind of, you know, support system for them once they got there. It's not like they were taking them there because there's a new program for drug treatment, or there's like a new food bank or something like that, which should be the case. They were getting them out of here because wealthy developers wanted to come into Venice. So it was kind of brutal, you know, it was kind of brutal. They were just, you know, scooping them up. And then all of a sudden you hear that, oh God, what's her name? Pretty woman, Richard Gere, Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts bought this big house in Venice that was, you know, a block away from Abbot Kinney. Abbot Kinney, one of the most popular streets in the world. It's nothing but, you know, these really kind of high-end shops, clothing shops, ice cream shops. I could literally take you to a place on Abbot Kinney where you can get a scoop of avocado ice cream. It's all handmade and it's all homemade, and the handmade scoop of ice cream is $24. So yeah, $24 for one scoop of ice cream. So that's the kind of place that we're talking about. Just really, you know, cushy high-end stuff. And it's a beautiful strip. You know, Abbot Kinney actually is a beautiful drive. But, you know, it was clearly what was going on is, you know, yeah, the developers were coming in. Now, since then, Venice has become like the deal. Like everybody right now, Venice is the place you want to be. After living on the south side of Venice Beach, a decade later, after living in Marina Del Rey that whole time, we finally found this amazing place that we live at now, which is on the north side. I no longer worry about Rose Avenue. And it's funny because I live about 100 yards from where I very first moved when I very first came out here. So now we don't worry about Rose Avenue. Venice Beach is like, that's the deal, man. Johnny Knoxville lives in Venice. Conor McGregor bought a new house in Venice. He just sold it, but Post Malone had a beach house down here in Venice. Justin Bieber still has a beach house down here in Venice. So Venice is like the deal. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a homeless person during the day at all in this area whatsoever. At night, we'll occasionally see a couple, but they're all down, you know, in downtown. Now, I remember thinking back then, now this is like 2008, I remember thinking, well, if they're doing that here, there's other neighborhoods that they're doing that to. There's Malibu, Redondo, Manhattan Beach, you know, all the other beach cities. And I remember thinking that, well, if they're dropping them off in downtown, I hope downtown's ready to receive them, because that is going to get overblown, and eventually they're not going to keep coming back here if they know that the police are just going to chuck them in a car and fuck with them and, throw them back downtown. So that was the beginning of what's now known as Tent City. And, between, 2008 and now, over the course of the last decade, man, I am telling you, in this city, probably more than most cities, the gap of income inequality is so obvious. It is so obvious. Like, I don't think, I tell you what, if there is a middle class, I don't know what defines it. When I was in college, I knew tons of people that in Iowa that made 25, 30 grand, and they lived a good life. Like, that was solid in Iowa, and if people made 60,000 a year in Iowa, that was like, man, you were really doing good. And if you were 100,000, you were rich. Out here, it's like the uber wealthy, and then basically small business owners that have found a way to carve their niche, and then the gap between there, it's like it just drops to damn near homeless or near homeless. Like waiters and stuff, like every person I know that's a waiter, they're living with like 5 friends in a 2-bedroom, and they're all splitting the bills. The income inequality was just so obvious, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And slowly but surely, as that happened, the homeless population started growing. There was no increase in like minimum wage that, matched inflation. It just got worse and worse and worse. And then you add on top of it, one of the big killers, guys, one of the big things that really drove the homelessness through the roof, opiates. And once we got control of the heroin fields in Afghanistan, heroin went through the roof. And now that fentanyl, which is dirt cheap to manufacture, now that that's in the game, the homeless, because it's escapism, right? That's why most of these people are doing drugs. Their life's fucking horrible, and they're in a terrible place, and they fall into the trap of take this pill or shoot this, drug in your veins, and you feel fucking some sense of happiness and, for a time period. It's escapism. Before they know it, they're hooked. And that's what it is. Now, we can debate all that stuff all day long. Why am I telling you this? Well, Tent City in Los Angeles and Skid Row, it is the largest homeless problem per city that any city has ever known. I'm going to tell you a number here that's going to blow your mind, and please Google it. You want to know how many people make up LA's Tent City now? 59,000. 59,000 homeless people reside in downtown LA. Of those 59,000 people, close to 6,000 of them live in Skid Row. Skid Row is only 5 blocks big. Almost 6,000 people live there. Now, there is no program to support these people with anything, okay? There is nothing there in the way of like sanitation. There's no, nothing for medical. There's nothing for food. Like, these are literally people that are living on concrete in a tent. And when they have to go to the bathroom, they walk out and shit on the ground and piss in a corner. And they leave it. And this has been happening now, every day that goes by. I'm not trying to be gross here, but just think of how much piss and shit accumulates, along with every other bodily excrement, with people throwing up, with, just anything that the body produces, right? Now throw on trash on top of all that. There's no sanitation system in play. Like, there's nothing, okay? And the law is built where these people they can't be fucked with. You can't kick them out. All of their belongings you can't touch. Like, the law is so in their favor. And as the distance between the haves and the have-nots continues to expand at a record rate, Tent City continues to grow and consume and take over everything, that it presses up against. And no one's doing anything about it. No one's doing anything about it whatsoever. There are, man, guys, if I took you for a drive down through Tent City and Skid Row, you would not believe. Like, I can describe it all day, but like, you would not believe it. It is like, when you see those videos of like, some third world place in sub-Saharan Africa where, it's just dilapidated boxes and cardboard homes on top of each other, and people are literally living on top of each other, and there's nothing but garbage and sewage and just excrement, and like just imagine that in LA, like times 2. Like it is, they're literally living on top of each other. There's nowhere for them to bathe. Like, one of the first things when you go down to Skid Row, about a good 20 blocks away, you can tell you're getting close to Tent City or Skid Row because of the smell. The smell in the air is foul. I mean, it will make you want to vomit. And you come around the corner and you just see what these poor people, man, what they're living in. And it's just like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, and nothing's being done for them, guys. Like, nothing. Governor Newsom just, he's not doing shit. Which the most obvious one that there should be is a drug treatment program, which there's not. The best they can do is get them all hooked on methadone, which once you're on that, you're done. I mean, once you get to a maintenance level of methadone use, that's a tough one to come back from. Now, you would think that the coronavirus would be ripping through that place, right? Well, if it is, no one knows about it. And recently, a week ago, the story that I read, and I read every story I could find, a week ago, there was so much concern because the 33rd person in Tent City was found, to be COVID-19 positive. And I'm thinking, the 33rd person? There's 59,000 people there that are living in the absolute most horrible, 33 people? Now, I know the argument is going to be, well, they're not tested, so you don't know. Okay, but see, guys, this is where it gets weird. This is where it gets super weird. I understand they're not tested. Okay, but if COVID-19 is as horrible as people say, and if it's as deadly as people say, and some people believe that the mortality rate is actually closer to like 8 to 10%, not less than 1%, and they think it's just that because people aren't tested, that's why you don't see it. Whether it's 1% or 10%, they should be dragging bodies out of there. Now, if they are, they're covering it up. And if they're not, you would have to wonder why, right? It should be ripping through there. Can we all agree on that? It should be ripping through there. So I'm going to say it again. If it is that deadly, they should be pulling thousands of bodies out of there. So if they are, they're either covering it up or the disease is not that deadly. And 33 people got it, I mean, so it doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying it's either or, guys. I don't know. That's my point in all this. Nothing makes sense. But here is my point for this podcast, and this is really, really terrifying. There's a major issue in Tent City and in Skid Row, and local doctors are fighting like hell to get this message out. And for some reason, the mainstream media is snubbing this story. They're not wanting to tell this story, and I can't figure out why. And when I say local doctors are fighting to get this message out, Dr. Drew is like one of the guys that's leading the way. Now, what message am I talking about? Okay. When I said that there's, just tons of, shit and piss everywhere down there, I mean, it's stacked. There are mountains of it. I'm not kidding. And guys, if you saw this, it would blow your mind. You would be like, what is going on? How could someone just walk out into the street and just dump and then just walk away? But that is what is happening. And it's happening because they have nowhere else they can go. And there's 59,000 of them. Okay, well, if you've ever been downtown, you also know that it's hot. It's super hot. It's baking hot in the summertime. You can cook a damn egg on the sidewalk. It's so hot. Well, the heat literally cooks the undigested food in the feces, and this has created a massive explosion in the rat population. Okay, and when I say massive, I'm talking to the point where a lot of homeless people have pet rats.
Huge rats crawling all over rotting garbage. Now, the rats are living in mountains of trash left uncollected for weeks, even months. The mayor has promised to clean it up. But I-Team investigator Joel Grover found the city continues to ignore the growing garbage heaps, and that puts all of us at risk.
You're getting a bird's eye view of LA's most notorious trash pile. It's in downtown on Ceres Avenue, right between the fashion and produce districts. Day and night, this spot and countless others are magnets for rats that could carry fleas infected with diseases. One reason experts say heaps of uncollected trash at hundreds of homeless encampments, where people are literally living in piles of garbage, like outside this supermarket and inside that mountain of filth on Ceres Avenue.
This is a breeding ground for typhus.
I'm disgusted by it personally.
We first told Mayor Garcetti about that Ceres Avenue health hazard last October.
Our responsibility is to make sure the trash doesn't even accumulate in the first place. That shouldn't have happened, and we're going to make sure it doesn't.
Right after that interview, the city did clear away the trash here. But month after month since then, we've been watching, and the filth has been piling up once again. And even a call to 311.
Hello, this is Mayor Eric Garcetti.
Couldn't get the city to act fast.
You're saying it could take up to 90 days to clean it up?
An inefficient system for collecting rotting garbage. And the I-Team has learned the city has no program to control the growing rat population that feasts on all that trash. Yep. Other big cities like New York and Washington have entire teams devoted to rat control. This DC crew is even experimenting with bait stations laced with a new rat contraceptive.
We have so many rats.
Pepe Garcia of LA's Sanitation Bureau.
Shouldn't the city be doing some kind of rodent control?
It's something that we'll look into.
But some say there's no time to waste, like UCLA infectious disease doctor Jeffrey Klausner, who says LA's trash and rat problem ranks right up there with the worst slums he's seen in the third world.
I am so worried.
Worried because rats carrying typhus-infected fleas were found around LA last fall, according to health department emails obtained by the I-Team. As the summer flea season looms and the garbage heaps grow, so does concern that an even bigger disease outbreak could hit LA in the months ahead. 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 Could hit LA in the months ahead.
So the reason this is terrifying to both local doctors and the CDC is that the rat population in Los Angeles hasn't just grown. It's currently estimated to be 10 to 12 times larger than it's ever been. And historically speaking, when that happens, you see a reemergence of typhus in the fleas that are on the rats. Now, when that happens, typhus gets into our pets, cats, dogs, and that's ultimately how typhus reaches us. And then you have a reemergence of typhoid fever, which over the last 12 months, that has reared its ugly head in Los Angeles again. There's been cases of typhoid fever, and they know it. At the same time, though, if things are going in a really bad direction, there'll be an increase in tuberculosis cases and cases of hepatitis A. Over the last 12 months in Los Angeles, there has been an increase in tuberculosis cases and in hepatitis A cases. Now, none of those diseases as a standalone are necessarily terrifying to the CDC. But what is terrifying is, historically speaking, When you see all of those emerge at once and start growing, what typically comes next is a disease known as Yersinia. You want to take a guess as to what Yersinia is? The bubonic plague, also known as the Black Plague, a true planet killer. The last time there was a massive outbreak of the bubonic plague, 200 million people died. And just to be crystal clear and avoid any confusion here, they're not saying that it's possible that there could be an outbreak of the plague in Los Angeles. They're saying it's likely. And what's terrifying about that, there is no protocol in place to defend against it. Now, if you research the reemergence of the plague, there's a lot of doctors who say, well, with antibiotics, we could actually treat it a lot better today than, they did way back in the day when it was ripping Europe apart. And the bubonic plague, created the plague doctor, right? Remember the mask, the long nose, all that stuff? That was because people that got the plague, part of what it does is it just rots flesh around your lymph nodes, and it smells terrible. So the plague doctors would wear those masks with the long noses, and they would drop smelling salts in the bottom of it so they didn't have to smell the rotting flesh of those who got the bubonic plague. But here's the argument. Those doctors that say, well, penicillin could, treat it and, most of those lives wouldn't be lost. Well, here's the reality. Without treatment, the mortality rate of the Black Death, Yersinia, the bubonic plague, is 30 to 50%. Okay? Put that in comparison to coronavirus. Depending upon who you ask, although I believe the coronavirus mortality is probably below 1% or right at it, it could be as high as 6%. Okay, fine. Even with treatment, even if you identify, the bubonic plague, which kills quickly, people can be dead in 3 to 5 days. 3 to 5 days. But if you identify it in the first 24 hours, it can lower the mortality rate down to around 10 to 15%. 10 to 15%. Okay? The coronavirus is arguably between 1 to 6%. If you got Yersinia, if you got the bubonic plague, and right away you were treated within 24 hours with antibiotics, there'd be a 10 to 15% chance that you're still going to die. Dr. Drew is one of the doctors that's leading the charge, trying to get, eyes on this story because the CDC is freaking out about it. And they've said we're completely unprepared for what is going on. Yes, it's real. If it really starts just ripping through, they don't know what they're going to do. And this is going on right now. I want to read you here some of Dr. Drew's quotes here. And these quotes are from a year ago when Dr. Drew was trying to lead this charge. On June 17th, 2019, on the Contagion Live website, in an article titled, "If Not Us, Who?", Dr. Drew urges clinicians to speak up on West Coast infectious disease crisis. That is the title. If Not Us, Who? Dr. Drew urges clinicians to speak up on West Coast infectious disease crisis. All right. Now, in this article, which is specifically about the homeless population in Los Angeles, Dr. Drew says the following. We have a horrible humanitarian crisis in Los Angeles where the government has been unable, because of various legal maneuvers taken against them, to enforce local laws as it pertains to people sleeping on the streets. Not only sleeping on the streets, but also anything that they accumulate cannot be touched because that's their belongings. Even if a schizophrenic who is rolling his or her stool up into balls and saying that's my belonging. So he's saying if a crazy person is rolling their own poop up, the cops can't take it. They can't do anything. It's their belongings, And he goes on to add, we just have an atrocious situation. It's almost without exception that the people who are really languishing on the streets and decaying have severe mental health issues. The most common being drug addiction, primarily opiate and stimulant, but also chronic severe major mental illness like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. For some reason, the government has taken the position that this is a housing problem. But for most, and I mean for the vast majority of the people on the streets, their condition makes them unwilling or unwanting to go indoors. So even when they correct the housing issue, they're still going to have the same problems on the streets. This is a result of the decay of the system we once had in place for treatment of the chronically mentally ill. And in closing here, guys, I'm going to read you this entire long quote of his because I just found it to be mind-blowing. This is coming from a doctor. Dr. Drew says, all of these dumps are completely overrun by rodents, just exploding with rodents. I became aware of this last summer when my own home became overrun, and I thought, oh my God, I have never seen anything like this. Having practiced medicine for 35 years in the San Diego Valley, I thought, oh my God, we're going to have a typhus outbreak. Typhus is endemic in the region. It's usually in the possums, the raccoons, maybe the bats. But with the volume of rodents, I thought, wow, this is everywhere now. And of course, typhus is going to spread. And it came. It was huge. It was terrible in the San Diego Valley, particularly in Pasadena. It spread all the way to the ocean. It did something I've never seen before. It crossed the 405, which is sort of a barrier between the inland and the coast, in which Dr. Drew says, and listen to this, all the while the city denied that it was going on and taking the position that typhus is not a serious illness. Things continued to deteriorate. I started talking to my infectious disease colleagues, and they were telling me that they were starting to see explosions of tuberculosis. Measles started breaking out. My concern was what happens when it gets into the homeless population. It could absolutely just tear through here. So we have tuberculosis, measles, typhus. I started looking at what usually comes on the heels of typhus in this area. What's endemic in this area? And that's Yersinia. I spoke to an expert about this, and lo and behold, the last outbreak of the bubonic plague in this country was in Los Angeles. It was controlled because of some very clever maneuvers to kill over 2 million rats. I dare say this time, we'd have to kill 12 million. It's massive, and it has spread. It's been documented in the squirrels, and it's just a matter of time before it gets in the rats, and then our pets, and then on us. Now remember, guys, this article was written last June, okay? Last June 17th, 2019. So what is going on in California? Why would the mainstream media not want to pick this story up? Why? I don't understand. Why is Dr. Drew in Contagion Live? What the fuck is that? I never heard of that website. Why is he having to revert to these, second, third tier websites? He's Dr. Drew. He's been on Oprah. He can be on anything he wants. He can go on Rogan. Like, why is he not able to get this message out? Why is he begging other clinicians to step forward and speak up? His house is being overrun by rats. Dr. Drew is an extremely wealthy guy, and his home is being overrun by rats from Tent City, and rats just exploding across this city. And no one's doing anything. The government says it's a housing problem. Gavin Newsom's not doing shit. Nothing. So do you see why I get confused when I can't enter my bank because I had this incredibly dangerous COVID-19, which I recovered from, and it wasn't nearly as bad as the worst flu that I've got. I tell you right now, COVID-19 was nothing compared to H1N1. I got the swine flu, and that, I truly thought I was going to die from that. And I think the reason I always get these things is I don't take flu shots. I've never had a flu shot. There's a lot of, that's a whole other podcast, but I don't. But I can tell you right now, COVID was bad. It was not fun. And I could definitely see why, if you were over 80 or whatever, if you had a pre-existing condition and you already had a weak immune system, yeah, it would definitely challenge you. But so does the flu. This is the Black Plague we're talking about, guys. The Black Plague is a planet killer. A real life, real deal planet killer. And the CDC's stance is they're terrified, by the way. You should read their comments about this. Because even if penicillin and antibiotics could today treat Yersinia, there's many different strains of it. There's many different strains of it. What they believe is that they believe that today's antibiotics, penicillin, amoxicillin, they could treat the known strain of Yersinia because it's bacteria based. But they have no idea, how many different DNA structures now. They have no idea if, the common known Yersinia bubonic plague would be the same one. So I don't have the answers. I'm researching the hell out of this. I mean, partly because this is what I do. I'm a documentarian, and of course, as you guys have already guessed, I'm obviously working on a documentary about all this. And I don't have the answer for what is going on with this, but this is really weird that at the same time that the coronavirus is going on, Dr. Drew and all these doctors are trying to get the word out about this, what they call a crisis involving, typhus, typhoid fever, and the bubonic plague, tuberculosis, they're trying to get the word out and no one will listen. No one will listen. And since the beginning, California has has handled this whole thing weird. Like, it is unbelievable how strict they are being versus other states when our numbers are just so low. And why are we not getting real numbers from our homeless population? Like I said, the highest number, it was a story 2 weeks ago. This article was freaking out because the 33rd person amongst the LA homeless population, the 33rd person was positive. I'm going, 33? Are you kidding me? Things are so disgusting. Things are horrific. They're so disgusting. It's a cesspool for disease down there. And 33 is the public number that they're going to run with? 33? And again, if that's because they're just not testing, then that begs up a greater question. Why not? Jesus. You want to talk about an area that should be quarantined? Jesus, quarantine Skid Row, for God's sakes. You would think that, again, common sense tells you they'd be dragging bodies out of there. And if they're not, why are they not telling us? What is going on? There are so many things that don't make sense about all this. And I'm not even presenting, here's the answer. This is what's going on. I don't know. I'm not at that stage yet where I can, have, a vision as to what I think is happening. But I can tell you there's a lot of things that are really, really weird. And if the bubonic plague has returned, and if Dr. Drew's house is being overran with rats, that worries me. Something that has a mortality rate of 50%, and if you get treated in the first 24 hours, you only have a 10 to 15% chance of dying then. Oh, and that's, by the way, if it's the bubonic plague that we know of, not a different strain. Because if it is a different strain that we can't treat, we are in some trouble. We are in some real trouble, and that's Dr. Drew's concern. I went on to read, more articles with him, and that's his biggest concern. Is he just says, "We're not equipped for this, man. We're not at all. We don't know." The bubonic plague is not something that they sit around trying to find cures to. A bunch of different strains of it. It's something that they thought they were done with at some point. So I don't know, guys. I leave this to you as always. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas on what you think is going on. Please feel free to research this. I am trying to help Dr. Drew and the others get the word out about this. At the very least, I don't think anything is worth a panic right away whatsoever. But I think that, if that's going on, that's something that we should all know about. And, yeah, and as far as the coronavirus goes, boy, man, the whole thing is just weird. This whole situation's weird. I don't understand how you can install stay-at-home orders and then open businesses up to 20%, but then everybody has a stay-at-home order. And so none of this makes sense to me. I don't know what our government's going to do in regard to helping people financially, because people are hurt right now, man. They are hurt, and like I said, I have great empathy for all these people. And clearly, the government must know that you took away everybody's job for 2 months, and you gave them $1,200, which that can't do much. So, what do you think is going to happen? What do you guys think is going to happen? At some point, as I said before, man, hungry people don't stay hungry for long. And I wouldn't either, I would, if I was sitting back and if I knew I was handed a shit hand like this, I'll find a way to eat. I will find a way, to keep a roof over my head, man. And I just fear that there's going to be some cities burning very soon because people are just tired of it. They're tired of being fucked around. They're tired of, having no idea what they're really facing. What are we really up against? Nobody has a real answer. But yet, our civil liberties are being stomped on. You tell me I can't go outside, you're gonna make life harder for me financially. You tell me if I want to jog, I got to wear a mask outside, but I can't stop and sit down, and I can't see my friends, and now I can't go into my bank because I got sick. Something, again, I had no choice in. It just happened, so now I can't go into my bank? Fuck off. I mean, this has gone beyond ridiculous. There are drones flying around, screaming at people to get inside. Come on, man. And if the government does do what's right and they get money to people, that's scary too, man. I mean, because they ain't doing it for free. There's already talk of guys, again, look this up. I'm not making this up. The government is already discussing a program to chip people, to put microchips in people that have been COVID positive to track the movement of this virus. Anybody want microchipped? Anybody want to put your hand out and have Uncle Sam stick a microchip in your body so he knows where you're at 24/7? Anyone? But they've been weird times, my friends. They've been weird times. And there has to be a line. There has to be a line that you can't let people step over. And unfortunately, I think our government's crossed that line in a big way. And I hope there's a way for us to all stand up and reverse some of these ridiculous decisions, because it just should be everybody's choice. If you're too afraid to go to work because you think it's an unsafe environment, you have the right to make that choice, but that's up to you. If you want to go work and you're cool with it, you should be able to. If you want to see your friends, you should be able to. You should be able to go to any building you want to go into. And if someone doesn't want to, that's their right too. Not to sound like a Jeffersonian anarchist, but Thomas Jefferson had it right, man. We run the country. Look this up, guys. Look this up and read about Dr. Drew talking about all this. There's a lot of people trying to get this story out there, so I'm just doing my part. I'm just sharing it. Thank you guys for listening. Last but not least, in the bottom of the links, guys, the description, last chance to take advantage of the big, massive discounts that we did for the lockdown. They'll be there till tomorrow at noon, and they're off. So if there's something of mine that you haven't seen, now's your chance to get it as cheap as we can make it, guys. Having said that, everybody, once again, I just want to thank you for your support, your kind words. Thank you for listening. If you haven't listened to my father's special episode that I posted, a couple days ago, please do that as well. Again, It just means a lot to me that I share his legacy. There will be another podcast as well coming tomorrow. I'm going to do my best to keep more episodes coming out on a much more regular schedule. And definitely let me know what you thought about this episode. I would love to know what you guys think. So until tomorrow, you guys have a good night, and I will talk to you then. All the best.